Welcome to the 112th broadcast of the T-ROH Show. It's your host, Keith. I have John with me.
Good morning, folks. Hope you enjoy it.
All right, this is what we're going to do here. This one's going to be about anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes long. We're going to show some people some things and news that they've been wanting to hear for quite a long time. And everybody always knew there was something wrong. They just couldn't put their finger on it. Well, folks, it's just going to be one of those T-ROHs, but times 10. All right, first of all, we're going to go into some issues in dealing with abortion. And the question being, is abortion illegal? That's where everybody had a hard time. How can they do this? Okay. So here we go. This is a book. This is on page 4 of the book. I'll show you. You can see it. The title is "Does International Law Protect the Unborn Child?" It was by Patrick J. Flood, and he has an abstract. So let's go down to page 3. And it goes through how international law is done and what happens and how it's all completed, from treaties to all these other things. Now let's go over to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It says inspired all of the human rights conventions. So the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is connected to every convention that they have. And subsequent declarations adopted since it was proclaimed by the General Assembly in 1948. It speaks in its preamble of equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family, and it states in Article 3, everyone has the right to life. And in Article 6, everyone has the right to recognition everywhere as a person before the law. Article 7 adds the notion of equality. All are equal before the law, and all are entitled to without any discrimination and every protection of the law. Now, every lawyer is bound to this, just so everyone knows. Every attorney is bound to these declarations and these conventions. Okay, now these affirmations are not qualified as to age or limited to the born, and it would be difficult to understand them as not including the living but not yet born. The all members of the human family of the preamble, for instance, can only mean all members of the human species, and everyone of Article 3 and 6 has to mean every human being, i.e., every living member of the species. Similarly, to all in the Article 7 are declared to be equal to each other must refer to all members of the human family. Abortion was not a major political or legal issue in 1948, and very few countries allowed it on any but the most serious grounds, notably when necessary to prevent the death of the mother. Although the drafters of the Declaration decided not to deal directly with the unborn, they opted for the broadest and most inclusive language possible to describe the subjects of human rights. The Declaration was intended to provide a rationale and stimulus for the conclusion of binding conventions to carry out the general human rights provisions of the UN Charter, which mentions no specific rights. As will be shown, one finds evidence in subsequent instruments to support the argument that the international community of states has taken a view that an unborn, that member of the human family, is included in the protection of international law. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights in 1966, the covenant, one of the two principal binding instruments foreshadowed by the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, says in Article 6, Paragraph 1, that every human being has the inherent right to life. This right shall be protected by law. No one shall be arbitrarily deprived of his life. As in the Declaration, the scope of every human being is not defined, as neither is it limited. And certainly, the ordinary meaning of the term is ambiguous. Further, in the next sentence, no one must mean no human being, or it means nothing. Paragraph 5 of the same article provides, in part, that the sentence of death shall not be carried out on pregnant women. To underscore the importance of the right to life, Article 4 of the covenant provides that not even in time of public emergency threatening the life of the nation may a state derogate from any part of Article 6. The foregoing provisions, and particularly the ban on execution of pregnant women, are clear expressions of a shared understanding that the unborn child is a human being who, as such, has an independent claim to the protection and merits of official recognition and intercession. These provisions otherwise make little sense. The ban on execution of a pregnant woman, which is unqualified and without exception, can only have the foundation, namely to spare the life of an innocent human being, her child. Moreover, it is only the fact that the woman is carrying an innocent child that exempts her from being put to death. She need not file any appeal or take other action to gain this exemption. The basis of all systems, and we're talking about all systems across the world, of criminal justice is that guilty shall be punished and the innocent shall not. And international human rights instruments reflect this logic. In his definitive study of international efforts to abolish capital punishment, William Schabas devotes considerable attention to the widespread acceptance of the norm against executing pregnant women. Writing of the debate in the Covenant on Human Rights Commission, he says, now, think of it this way, folks. I'll read this in a second. Think of it this way. Why do they not allow pregnant women on the front line or in war? If the woman's pregnant, she has to remain in the rear, in the military, outside of harm's way. If the child was not a child or a human being, that wouldn't matter, would it? The fact that she was pregnant. They had to throw her on the front lines anyways, fighting a war. Common sense, folks. With respect to the exclusion from execution of pregnant women, the Secretary General's annotation suggests that the provision was added out of consideration for the interest of the unborn child. The drafters of the covenant studiously avoided pronouncing themselves on the difficult issue of when the right to life begins. The civil and political rights covenant does, however, protect the unborn child, something that is completely compatible with provisions of the International Covenant on Economic and Social and Cultural Rights. Schabas also notes that for the pregnant woman, it is the unborn child's protection that is envisaged, and the sentence may well be imposed, although it may not be carried out. He later observed in 1962 study for the United Nations by the French Marc Ancel, I might be butchering that name, had concluded that most legal systems protected juveniles and pregnant women from the death penalty, and that in practice, a stay of execution for pregnant women nearly always led to commutation of the sentence. Okay, I can keep going here, but I think the point is proven. Now, lawyers are the ones that have basically put a copyright and a patent and an exclusion to everyone else. No one else can touch the law except for them. No one can practice law without a license from that American Bar Association. No one. Can't go in there. If you're not a judge, or if you're not a lawyer, can't be a judge. If you're not a lawyer, you can't be a represented defendant. If you're not a lawyer, you can't be a prosecutor. You have to be that. They have professed this since the American Bar Association came into play, and then since the 1960s. They even amended the constitutions of all the states, stating that they changed the judicial department into a judiciary and said, no one can be a judge unless you're a lawyer. That means you have control of the law. If you have absolute control of the law, then you have the absolute responsibility and liability for the law. Now, if the convention says right here, and that's the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, right here, says that a pregnant woman cannot be executed, it's obvious that the child is a human being. Now, how many lawyers are in the U.S. Supreme Court? All of them. They're all lawyers. And they gave the order of Roe v. Wade, 1973. Meaning abortions were legal. They gave that order. Now, are they subject to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights? That's the question. Did they sign up for it? Now we go to the United Nations Human Rights Office of the High Commissioner. Okay? Now all we got to do is we come over here and we say International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. You click that. This is the status of ratification interactive dashboard. That's all it is. Dark blue means state party. I believe that looks like, I don't know, looks like the United States of America, doesn't it to you, John? It's in blue.
Yes, it does. It looks like they signed in full-fledged, doesn't it?
Yeah. And I believe China is a signatory to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. And they're a state party. And the ones that took no action was, of course, Saudi Arabia, South Sudan, and Myanmar, and a couple of other little islands, Malaysia and Indonesia. So what's that mean, folks? It means every lawyer in the United States is subject to the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights. When it clearly states in there that babies are human beings, unborn children are human beings. They're all classified as that. Yet not one of them, not one has stood up and said a word. Now, let's go in and let's look at how many children have been aborted. Okay, here's just a little study. It's just ready to get your puke bag out. 60,069,971 children, human beings, have been murdered since 1973 under the order of the U.S. Supreme Court under Roe v. Wade.
That means they can be tried for that many counts of murder.
Every lawyer, not just them, every freaking lawyer, because refusal to act is the same as acting.
Yes, that's what I said. They can be, every one of them can be charged with 60 million counts of murder.
Mr. Mueller, you can be charged with 60 million murders by any international tribunal, and it'll stick. Sick, isn't it?
That it is. Very sick.
That lawyers, now ignorance of law is no excuse, by the way. And guess what they're going to try to do? Well, I'm not the one that did it. I didn't know, blah, blah. Ignorance of law is no excuse. You guys have sat there, women and men, both of you, have claimed that you have a monopoly on the law, and nobody else can practice law. And that makes you freaking responsible for 60 million human beings being killed, murdered since 1973. I think that that's a rough estimate, in my opinion.
I think you're right, because I think it's well over that.
Now, this is what the Nuremberg trials say. Here's the Nuremberg principles. Any person who commits an act which constitutes a crime under international law is responsible, therefore, and liable to punishment. They didn't say just the people. Any person. You lawyers have persons, don't you? Matter of fact, you, I don't know. I think you all created them. The fact that internal law does not impose a penalty for an act which constitutes a crime under international law does not relieve the person who committed the act from responsibility under international law. Oops. Just because the U.S. Supreme Court created an order under Roe v. Wade does not mean that you had to follow it. It was an unlawful order. It was murder then, and it's murder now. The fact that a person who committed an act which constitutes a crime under international law acted as head of state or responsible government official, that's you, Mueller. You're playing these political games over there. That's you, buddy. Does not relieve him from responsibility under international law. You're responsible, Mr. Mueller. This principle can be paraphrased as follows. It is not an acceptable excuse to say, I was just following my superior's orders.
Didn't you say that was documented from the Nuremberg trials?
Yes.
And how many did they hang from the conclusion of those particular proceedings?
Many. They even hung people that were running newspapers.
That's correct. They did, for inciting the people to follow.
That's right. Now, can I hear checkmate? You're done, guys. You no longer have, well, you do have a monopoly. Let's put it that way. You got a monopoly on the law. This is where what nature's law says, what comes around goes around, and is getting ready and actually has come around. Every lawyer, no matter if you hold a bar card with the American Bar Association, the Lawyers Guild, or any other kind of freaking BS association that you guys have, every single one of you are responsible for over 60 million murders of human beings.
Would you say that would be a notice of indictment?
There's enough evidence, wouldn't you say?
I think there is.
There's plenty of evidence here
Yes.
to show that they are personally responsible, because it is not an acceptable excuse to say, I was just following the Supreme Court's orders of Roe v. Wade. And every day from this point forward, now that you have notice, and you know this because this is on a judicial record, because it's on the T-ROH show, and the T-ROH show is also under the American National Press Union Code of Ethics, and everything that's put on the T-ROH show can be used in any judicial proceeding anywhere as evidence. Because believe it or not, it was never the grand jury that was the fourth branch of government. That was a lie by those who said it was okay and gave orders to kill over 60 million human beings. It's actually the press. They're the fourth branch. And always have been.
And even they have condoned it to the fullest.
That's correct.
That means that all the press out there, the so-called news media, the mainstream news media is all guilty too of all them 60 million deaths.
60 million deaths. Those are, and you failed to do what? Oh, protect the innocent. You failed to protect the innocent. That means you had the authority and power and the ability to protect them, and you failed to do it. That makes you responsible. Now let's see how many have a conscience and may have a hard time sleeping tonight after hearing this. You have no. You guys are guilty of murder, 60 million times and over. You really think you have any authority to file any charges against anyone from this day forward? You're murderers. Every single one of you. You better start turning state's evidence real freaking quick. And I would suggest that every one of you shut those freaking murder organizations down now. And all you officers around there that are hiding behind your lawyers, you're hiding behind murderers. They're all just as liable, and they have freaking no immunity whatsoever from that liability. You're done. Thanks for listening to the 112th broadcast of the T-ROH Show. Got through this a little bit quicker than I thought. See you next week.